Good morning and welcome to the Scrutiny Committee general meeting today. Action of business, apologies for Councillor Jack Redman, who is going to be joining us later on this morning. Moving to point 2, does anyone have any declarations of interest they'd like to give this morning?
We can take that as a no.
And then we'll now move to minute 3, the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 6th of October, pages 3.
I think we just ask first of all if members are happy to approve it, and then we can go through if there's any points that members want to raise. So, committee happy to approve the minutes of correct record first?
Agreed.
In case of any members get any questions they want to pick up on the minute.
We'll move on to roll and action log, pages 15 to 16.
That's what you should probably notice that there's 2 items in the roll action log. It's actually the same item duplicated, just the terms that won't be repeated. So it's about our information that was the Health and Social Care Partnership were asked to provide. The last time the report was presented, and that's included in the report for today. So there's nothing in the roll action log that's going to be outstanding after today's meeting.
As discussed, if we can go to the Falkirk Health and Social Care Partnership report.
That will be Patricia.
Patricia, if you'd like to go through the report, please.
Thank you, convener, and thank you for accommodating us earlier in the agenda. I must apologise, I need to leave at 10:30 to join another meeting, but my colleagues Martin Tom, Suzanne Thompson and Stephen Kirkwood are here to pick up any questions should that be required beyond 10:30. So members will see before you the regular report that we submit annually to Falkirk Council about the performance of Falkirk Integration Joint Board. It's quite an extensive report, including as one of the appendices our annual performance report that we're required to produce, which has a lot of detail in relation to our performance, particularly against the strategic plan, but also I would highlight to you a number of the case studies which really give you a flavour of the scale and impact of the work that we're doing in partnership with our communities, with the third sector, with the council and the health board. So just to summarise, the report presents the annual assurance statements that we provide to the Integration Joint Board, which come through from the Audit Committee, the Clinical Care Governance Committee and the Joint Staff Forum. And you'll see outlined in the report an explanation of how those committees work. We also have included the Internal Audit Annual Assurance Report, the annual audited accounts for the IGB, the annual performance report, as I've said, but also the performance monitoring report and also some information on the performance reported within the local government benchmarking framework. So I know that elected members will have had a chance to peruse the report, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have on the report, and my colleagues are here to assist with that. Thank you.
Does any of us have any questions for Patricia on the report?
So in that case,
with no questions, is the committee happy to note the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
No questions.
Sorry. So we'll now move on to the Public Prime Falkirk Towns Limited, the Safer Streets Initiative, Taxi Marshals and Safe Base. Yeah.
I think that might be Jackie, although I see Malcolm Bendis.
Is Malcolm here?
If Malcolm's going to be doing it, or Jackie.
Hi there. Hi, Jackie MacArthur here from Economic Development. I'm sorry, I'm not sure, is Malcolm going to be taking the report, or is he? Oh, here he is. Hi.
Morning, everyone. No, I'm absolutely happy for Jackie to walk us through this. Thank you.
Okay, morning everyone. Thank you so much for accommodating the report a bit earlier in the agenda. I'm actually off on annual leave today. I'm away to New Zealand in the morning, so I'm happy to be here this morning just to give you an update on Falkirk Towns and the Safer Streets initiative. So you will see before you the report on Falkirk Towns and Safer Streets, and in particular the two appendices for each Falkirk Towns and Safer Streets initiative. I'm quite happy to go through that in great detail. You'll see there's quite a lot of detail in there, but I'm pretty sure that members in the past have had quite a lot of questions to ask on both initiatives. So how do you want me to do this? Do you want me to go through the report bit by bit, or would you just like to ask me some questions on it?
It would be good if you could just give us a light summary, Jackie, and then we can
Of
ask
course.
questions. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. More than happy to do that. So Falkirk Towns have been working with the council for many years now. The funding that we have provided to Falkirk Towns has reduced significantly over the years, but they are a partner in terms of working with us on a number of initiatives in the town centre, supporting businesses. They help us to promote the town and the wider area. They deliver things like Christmas events for us, and certainly over the last 10 years or so, they have been supporting us to deliver a number of initiatives that have really improved the vitality of the town centre. They really came to the fore during the COVID pandemic, where they very quickly moved into an emergency footing and worked with us really closely to get grant support out to the businesses and just to provide that, care that was required just to get businesses through that really difficult time. They also provide a street ambassador service, and the street ambassador that we have there is a lady who's been employed by the organisation for over 15 years. So she really is a well-known face in the town centre. And this individual not only gives day-to-day support to businesses as and when they need it, but she is trained to provide tourist information. She's also medically first aid trained, and she has administered naloxone to quite a few vulnerable people in the town centre over the years who have suffered from drugs overdoses and so on. So that is a vital piece of work that they do in the town centre that sometimes goes unseen, but really does make a difference to the well-being of the town centre and certainly the businesses. So the town, the Falkirk Towns do support us in terms of doing promotional activities in the town centre, but they also deliver for us our Safer Streets programme. So the Safer Streets programme is something that we as a council have funded for many years, and that consists of two elements, one being a safe base. So we have provided them with a facility that used to be Park Street, where we brought together all the key emergency services, including Scottish Ambulance Service and the police, and also a number of volunteers. We have procured through Falkirk Delivers a security company who also support the Safer Streets initiative in terms of first aid provision in the town centre. So that creates a space, a safe space for people in the town centre when the young people in particular, when they get separated from friends, when they've overindulged in alcohol, quite often overindulged with drugs, they get into street fights, and what we do is we bring them into the safe base, we give them that one-to-one support they need, medical support if it's required, and quite often we make sure that they're escorted home at the end of the night. Now, that creates not only a safe space for the individuals, but it reduces antisocial behaviour in the town centre. And remember, we do have a number of elderly people who live in the town centre, and we have a lot of businesses that operate in the evening economy. So that additional support really just helps to reduce that antisocial behaviour that can be quite a blight on the town centre. The numbers for the safe base have reduced over the last few years, which is a good thing. We're seeing less people needing that support. But we also, in addition to the Safer Streets, the other element that I'm talking about is the taxi marshalling that we do. So the taxi marshals, we have 2 operatives who are on the the taxi stand on a Friday and a Saturday evening, and they're really there just to support the queues, to help the taxi drivers, just to keep that antisocial element to a minimum, and that works really well. And we have many hundreds of people that go through that service every month, so it's very, very valuable in the town centre. So that's a very broad brush of the work that we do with Falkirk Towns, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Jackie on the report? Councillor Balfour?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Just a couple of questions. First one is, what's the associated costs with the handyman service?
So are you referring to the costs that I've set out in the report, Councillor Balfour?
I didn't see them there.
Right, so we do provide, there's a handyman in the town centre. Now with the bid, because the bid operates within a defined geographical area, there's about 630 odd businesses that are in that defined area. And what the bid do is they take an element of their rates levy, and that goes towards a number of initiatives in the town centre. So one of the things that they do is pay a handyman to do a handyman service. Now, anything that the bid operates in the town centre must be over and above what the council provides. So right at the very start, before the bid is even operational, we put together service level agreements which set out all the key elements of work that the council operates in the town centre, and then anything that the bid does has to augment that and be in addition to that, and that's where the handyman comes in. So we support the handyman service financially. It's about £15,000 a year that we pay for that, but the service that we get is absolutely incredible, because while we have very good and dedicated teams, quite often there's a bit of a time delay by the time we get things done, whereas I can immediately react and pick up the phone and get the handyman out there. He's out working in the town centre from really early in the morning, so quite often a lot of the work that he does isn't visible to people. It's just when it's nice and clean, or fly posters are removed, or graffiti's been removed. It happens, before most people are coming into the town centre. So it's a great service and it works really well.
Okay, thanks for that. The other one was, it mentions the public Wi-Fi in the district town centres as a notice board for all businesses. Can you explain a wee bit more about that?
Sure. Happy to do that. So as part of the Town Centre Capital Fund works, we installed public Wi-Fi. Denny was the first town back in 2017, and we've rolled that out across the Falkirk and the other district town centres. So we've put the infrastructure in place so that if someone comes into the town centre, they are immediately asked to join the public Wi-Fi. It's free public Wi-Fi. Obviously that is contributing to our digital communities objectives in the council and reducing these inequalities, so people can join that public Wi-Fi and they can use that to look for jobs, report things to the council, etc. But the biggest benefit of having that is that we can support businesses to promote what they're doing in each of the town centres. And that's where we need to work with Falkirk Delivers, because they offer that network of businesses that they've built up a relationship with. So we've been, through our Economic Recovery Fund, we've been giving them additional support so that they can work directly with the businesses and help them to make that leap from their traditional trading platforms onto an online trading platform, and we're using our infrastructure to be able to do that. So we're adding value to our initial investment and supporting our business communities at the same time. Unfortunately, that funding for the Economic Recovery Fund will cease at the end of March. So that means that that will be taken away from our district town centres, but it still exists in Falkirk Town Centre.
Okay. So how many of the businesses are actually on that or advertising on that?
Well, you'll find that most of the town centre businesses are already advertised. So if you were to go into Grangemouth, for example, Councillor Balfour, you'll be interested. We've got public Wi-Fi in Charlotte Dundas, and we also have it in the town centre. So most of the businesses in the town, the ones who are engaging with Falkirk towns, and that's most of them, are all featured on that town centre Wi-Fi.
Okay, hey, thanks for that.
Councillor Binney.
Yes, thank you, convener. Firstly, I just want to say you're street ambassador, and I know this for a fact. Obviously, I meet in the town quite a lot. It's a very valuable and worthwhile role for the town, especially for the business and for the people who come into the town. So kudos for that, because that's a great addition for Falkirk, and I'm sure everybody appreciate that. However, my question is about the taxi marshalling service. I see you've mentioned it as only like the 2 days, Friday and Saturday, 10 to 3, that's 5 hours. So double that up if it's 2 people, that'll be 10 hours in the week. No, sorry. Yeah, that'll be 20 hours in the week, if my sums add up. What the question was, like during the festive period, does your taxi marshalling, obviously they'll have extra hours, and what is the extra hours worked? I know that's quite specific because you've mentioned the cost for that's 20,000, so there's not really a breakdown there. It's just, you've just mentioned like the 10 to 3 for 2 people, Friday and Saturday, which I think works out at 20 hours a week. So yeah. Is that included in that £20,000?
Yeah, that Councillor Binney, thanks for that question. Yes, that £20,000, but we have to also appreciate that Falkirk Towns also put some money into that via the bid levy money. So they put in about £17,000 too, and that's obviously split between the safe bays and, you know, the taxi marshals. But we really spend quite a bit of time in terms of looking at the budgets and seeing, you know, that we cover those nights that need to be covered. So for example, if there's a concert on in the stadium, or there's recently with the fireworks going on in the town centre, so we try to make sure that that provision is heightened during these times. So it's this careful kind of jigsaw, I suppose, over the year where we've got quiet periods and making sure that we've got that provision for when we need it in the town centre. So that's why I would have to have gone into every single week to say who we had on that night. But the taxi marshals are not just taxi marshals, they're also first aiders, they're trained security people. So even if they're having a quiet night, they go off on a walk around the town centre and provide that additional support to people in the town centre and to businesses if there's any disturbances, etc. So it works very well.
No, I'm pleased to hear that. But it's just kind of to get a clear picture. So obviously they do more work than that was written in the report. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, they do. Thank you, Councillor Binney.
Councillor Forrest.
Hi, thanks. Jackie, I've previously been a director in one of the bids in the neighbouring area, and I know how valuable the bid is. One of the things that we always struggled with was getting everybody to pay their levy, and I note that it's currently sitting at 71%.
Yes.
a lot of that obviously will be due to closures, etc. You'll never get 100%. But is there anything else being done to try and increase that percentage?
Yeah, we actually have quite a good recovery rate,
Yeah.
Councillor Forrest, in comparison to other bid companies. And again, the council support Falkirk Towns to collect that bid levy. In other places, councils charge the local bid companies to do that, and in Falkirk we don't as yet. So we offer that support to them free of charge. But yes, it's always a challenge, and certainly in these times it's even more challenging because businesses are struggling. The pandemic has been devastating to many of our town centre businesses, and this cost of living crisis is exacerbating that situation. So we are doing everything we can to support the businesses and work with them, and obviously we want to recover that bid levy, every penny that we possibly can, and we're working very hard to do that.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, I haven't been on both sides of it, actually having to find the money to pay out and to actually spend it wisely. I know exactly how difficult it can be. So thank you very much for your help.
Thank you for your question.
Any final questions for Jackie? Thank you, Jackie. Hope you have a great holiday.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. See you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye. Since we've swiftly moved through these two reports, we'll postpone the break and move on to point 5, the Public Town Services Children and Young People annual reporting statements. Robert and Sarah.
So Sarah's going to present the report.
That's it. Thanks, Robert. Sarah.
Thank you, convener. So, good morning, everybody. The purpose of this report is to update Scrutiny Committee regarding services for children and families. And these are services that are providing support as an external organisation. These activities are funded by the council and they fall within the public pound reporting and monitoring arrangements. The recommendations are set out for members at section 2 of the cover report, and section 3 provides background information to committee. So these organisations receive funding from Children's Services and they are largely third sector organisations. We do fund a service from NHS Forth Valley, and they're funded on the basis that they're able to provide services that we can't readily provide. We work really closely with these organisations and they support us to meet our corporate and strategic partnership priorities. The majority of external organisations have been impacted by funding reductions in recent years and they continue to be subject to ongoing review. As part of the following the public pound process, monitoring officers measure performance for the organisations that they are responsible for. Reporting statements are attached as appendices and these provide members with a summary overview of the services that are funded by the council, setting out the agreed objectives or outcomes, performance information during the period and a financial overview. So the services that we are funding significantly enhance our ability to meet our statutory responsibilities and those national and local policy objectives. The services may have been funded for many years by the council, but the monitoring and the review processes that we have really ensure that the services are adjusting and they're aligning to internal and external policy drivers and changes in legislation. Section 4 outlines some of those national and policy drivers that I've just mentioned. So what we have there is the Promise, GIRFEC, the Children's Partnership Plan, and very importantly, our Closer to Home strategy. The table at section 5 details the funding received by the organisations that we're considering today. We've put their current year and previous year values. And to conclude, each appendix attached provides a detailed statement of the service provided. I want to note with you our intention to change the way that we commission services from external organisations. So we are intending to move away from 1 year grant funding to contracting of these kind of special specified services. So I'm joined today by Cathy McGarry and Gail McIntyre, who are service managers with Children's Services and the monitoring officers for the services. And I'd just like to refer committee back to the recommendations set out at section 2. And we're asking Scrutiny Committee today to consider those individual reports. I think the intention is just to ask you if you have any questions for each appendix that's been attached to this cover report. And we're seeking you to select an option to approve the report and acknowledge the process by the external provider in meeting the Council's priorities. Perhaps you want to request further information on specific aspects or to request actions with follow-up. So I will stop there, convener, and as I say, myself and colleagues are very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Does anyone have any questions for Sarah?
I think maybe before we go on, convener, I think we just agreed that if we just say which appendix we want, so we go through appendices one by one. So the first questions will be on Aberlour and we reach out and we years outreach. So.
Councillor Binney?
Sorry, my appendix is on, my question is on appendix 5, so I'll just wait while I just now. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Balfour?
Thanks, convener. Yeah, it was mentioned that you're moving away for the yearly funding. Can you explain a wee bit more about that and how that will impact?
I'm happy to take that question. Thanks, Councillor Balfour. So this is our intended approach. And this really would work well for our third sector organisations in terms of removing them from this year on funding, which can be difficult for them to kind of predict with us in terms of that continuity of funding, our commitment to funding, our commitment to those objectives. So our funding arrangements with these organisations have been in place for many years, and they have been subject to decreasing or flat cashing of the funding. As I've pointed out, some of those local and national drivers that we're working within, we absolutely need to make sure that any of the services that are being provided to children, young people and families in Falkirk truly do meet those objectives. So we really want to align our direction of travel very closely with absolutely what is needed, what a kind of modern support service will look like for Falkirk, and it gives us an opportunity to commission in a way that will allow organisations to participate in a fair process, and also for those who move through that successfully to be able to plan and accordingly within a 2 or a 3 year funding envelope. So that would be our intention of how we move forward with that. So I'm hoping that's helpful and answers your question.
Yeah, that helps, yeah. I just wondered if while this transition's been moved through, will there be any impact on service at all, or is there likely to be any issues arising as it's transitioned?
So, Councillor Balfour, what we would do is we would need to make sure that there's an assessment of any risks to either delivery of service or to organisations as we move through that process. It's fair to say that this intended commissioning route was a decision that Children's Services made 3 years ago, and it's probably been reported in the cover report over the past couple of years. But as you know, as a result of the pandemic, we really had to prioritise our activities. So we have very much been talking to our providers and letting them know that it would be our intention to move away from one year funding. But we would need to make sure that we have all of the activities properly in place. And given that we're sitting just now in November at the end of the year, we are going to have to be able to assess whether there is any way we could manage moving to a different arrangement with our other providers before it then takes us into a new year and a need to commit to these services, because they are relied upon by the core services that are delivered and also by the people that are in receipt of them. So just some assurance, I suppose, that we'll work through that process with some care. But again, it'll be about making sure that we get the timing right, that we can see the process through appropriately and fairly, and that we're not taking too many risks with that approach either.
Okay, thanks for that.
Councillor Forrest.
Hi, thanks. It's Appendix 1, page 24, about Aberlour. Works in several work groups, a number of which the council already funds. How's the support from Aberlour different from the other?
So, Councillor Forrest, what's set out there are working groups that Aberlour participate in. So they have a seat at the table within these groups. So what they're doing is they're bringing their local knowledge and their expertise, because they often work with families that we wouldn't in children's service necessarily know. Yes, we'll know them from schools and early years centres, but not necessarily from a social work setting. So it is really important that they contribute to the kind of the bigger picture. So we have always had very good working relationships with our third sector partners. So we consider them to be really kind of critical to our strategic direction of travel. Plus, organisations like Aberlour bring a lot with them, so they have the ability to be able to apply for a number of funding streams that we as a local authority wouldn't. So we really benefit from that. They also have a really important fund that they make very much available to families in Falkirk for urgent assistance. So these are the kind of things that they help support around the poverty agenda, etc. So we do have Cathy here, who's the monitoring officer for the service. She may choose to add some more to that, but hopefully that's kind of giving you a sense of where they sit within those groups and what they add.
Yeah, it's just as I said, we fund some of them, and I just wondered where everybody meshed in. But if it's an extra catch-all, then that's great.
Dana, I have a question. If you were to move to the commission model, how would that affect following the public pound regime? Would that be subject to scrutiny by this committee? And if not, how would that be monitored?
Thank you. So it would take this, I mean, whether it means all of the services that we currently fund via following the public pound would no longer sit within following the public pound, but some that are commissioned convener would come out of the following the public pound process, but they would be just as robustly monitored through our procurement processes. So we have really clear the contractual arrangements that would go alongside our commission services. So there would be an assurance to yourself and to committee that would be very, very closely monitored and evaluated through the stringent processes around commissioning. And we work really closely with procurement colleagues to be able to do that.
Thank you. Any further questions on Appendix 1? Any questions for Appendix 2, Aberlour? Family Support Centre, Langleys?
Sorry. Wasn't very sure how we're going. Yeah, there were. It's on page 25 under the conclusions in the Aberlour one. It's the Aberlour. They haven't been. I've lost my computer's just went knackered, so I'm just trying to think on the hoof here. It hasn't really met the evidence, the outcomes, or whatever what they were supposed to be doing. Was there any specific reason for that? But apart from the joint working agreement, it didn't really meet the details of the joint working agreement.
Shall I take that one, Sarah? Yes, so they haven't met the expectations in terms of numbers of families supported. They have worked more intensively with more families, just as an indication of the kind of need that's coming into the service. But what they've told me is that their staffing costs have increased, and their overhead costs have increased. And with the static funding, that has reduced staff capacity. And then that was exacerbated by COVID, where before they were able to kind of absorb some of that and increase their capacity by having families and parents in for group work, seeing several families and parents at once. And that through COVID was not as possible. They had, within the first two reports, which are both Aberlour, you'll see that during this period they have co-located. One of the properties that we had been providing them with was no longer available because it had to be repositioned for nursery provision, and that had enabled them to make some efficiencies in terms of management and structure of the service, but it still didn't quite cover that ability to meet the needs of as many families as we'd asked them to. So with the joint working agreement going forward, that is addressed to be a more realistic target.
Thank you.
Moving on to Appendix 2, Aberlour Family Support Centre Langley's. Do we have any questions? Moving on to Appendix 3, Bernardo's. Any questions? Appendix 4, Homestart, Falkirk West. Appendix 5, CAMS, NHS Forth Valley. Any questions? Councillor Binney?
Yes, thank you, convener. Firstly, I just want to say, Sarah, thank you very much for your report here. I appreciate they are time consuming, but obviously they're necessary for transparency. I have two questions. Do you want me to ask them two together or just one at a time?
Happy for you to ask both together.
Right, that's lovely. So it's regarding CAMS. It's on page 37, Appendix 5. What is the current wait time for a young person to be supported by CAMS, either being looked after in the community, being looked after by the local authority, I should say, or actually at their family home? And the question is, and within that question, is there a difference in wait times depending on their care status, meaning looking after in a care home or in the community? That's my first question.
I'm happy to answer that, Councillor Binney. So in terms of the current wait times for CAMS, I think this particular service is a separate service from the main Forth Valley NHS CAMS. So in terms of the mainstream CAMS, I'm not sure what the waiting time is, but I do think it is quite significant, quite a few months, I believe. In terms of the waiting times for case status and the child's needs, for this particular service or looked after psychology service, it would be based on need. So if a young person was in crisis or a placement was at risk of imminent breakdown, they would respond to that. It wouldn't be based on level of time you've been waiting on a list. And we do try to avoid having any kind of waiting list within the LAC psychology service.
And with regards to times, so I take it that's done immediately then, obviously, if there is that need, then they're able to see the psychologist, is that correct?
The psychologists try and be really responsive to needs, so if there is a crisis, they could pick up a referral fairly quickly. It might be that what they offer is initially a phone call, or they might offer a consultation to the carer or the adoptive parents. They might not be able to immediately offer therapeutic work, but they will always respond in a crisis and offer some level of support to try and alleviate that crisis and support the child or family.
That's great, thank you for that. My second question is, can you elaborate on the types of therapeutic care they promote? And is one full-time equivalent psychologist enough to meet the demands of this service?
Yeah, so I think answering the second one first is probably the easiest. I think there is always demand. There is a high level of demand. I think our looked after population do require specialist support. I think also our carers and social workers, I think that is invaluable. So I think that if we had unlimited resources, I'm sure there would be a need there to provide that. In terms of the types of therapeutic care that's offered, I think it would depend on the needs of individuals. We definitely want to offer trauma-informed approaches that have got a good understanding of attachment and child development and what children need, and that we are able to respond to each individual, their unique needs and presenting behaviours.
Thank you, Gail. Thanks.
Any further questions? Appendix 5. Appendix 6, One Parent Family Scotland. Any questions? Councillor Binney?
No.
No, okay. Appendix 7, Warriors. Appendix 8, Who Cares Scotland. Any questions? I have a question. What would the impact of service provision be if the council was not able to fund at the same level? For all of them?
I'll come in, convener, if the question is for all of the services. So the organisations that we bring before you today have all been impacted by reduction in funding. I'm sure I'm correct. I'm looking at Cathy and Gail, but I think all of them have been impacted. Some obviously far more than others. But what we will do, monitoring officers and myself as the head of service, monitoring officers will absolutely kind of manage with the organisations kind of smaller reductions in funding, and they will talk to organisations about where there's going to be no increase in funding. Where we've had some really significant reductions in funding, then I've joined monitoring officers in those conversations with providers, because that's obviously really, really difficult information for them to not just hear, but for them to manage. So we do as much as we can to support and manage this with them, alongside them. And as Cathy was describing, it can be supporting them with in-kind contributions too, about, you know, supporting them with venues and, you know, how to perhaps lessen some of the costs around venues and buildings, etc. So these services are really kind of critical because they're funded to serve a need in our communities, and a need that we recognise that Falkirk children and young people have, but needs are very much changing. So what we are certainly noticing, and this is reflected by conversations with our third sector partners, is that demand is increasing really, really significantly. And that you know, there's a real kind of urgency to be able to support families before their circumstances worsen, become more critical. So what we really want to make sure is that where that added value that we get from working alongside these external organisations is absolutely pointing particularly towards the very kind of early intervention, preventative part of the landscape. So we're in really, really challenging times just now, and we are nothing but very transparent and frank with our third sector partners about that challenge that they feel is the challenge that we feel, and we need to work as much as we can together to try and alleviate the pressures on our families. So with cost of living crisis and all of the issues that are going to be facing families, and the fact that that's just going to rise bring another rise in demand. We are really just trying to ensure that we will take really kind of good care around the actions moving forward, but we certainly will need to continue to work with our third sector providers. We rely on them, and they really do offer and enhance what we can deliver as children's services.
Sarah, Councillor Aitchison.
Thanks, convener. And this would probably be for Sarah again, because it's kind of taken in all the organisations again. Yeah, I'm sure we're all aware that there's a social care recruitment and retention issues nationally and locally. Are these organisations experiencing these challenges as far as you know? And is this impacting on the delivery of the service they are funded to deliver?
Thank you, Councillor Aitchison. And your question is actually going to make me feel as if I'm perhaps answering the convener's question or bringing a better close to the convener's question, which is that's allowing me just to share a really good example of recent conversations with one of our third sector organisations where we were able to explore, you're absolutely right about that national and local recruitment and retention challenge. It's impacting on social care and qualified registered social workers. So a conversation that was had with one of our large third sector organisations was about how we can offset some of the challenge that is being faced currently in terms of recruitment within social work, children's social work services with the third sector position. Now, the staff that they largely recruit are social care workers, so they're children's workers. They do not require to have a social work degree. They don't have to have a social work qualification. Now, they might have some social workers in organisations, but largely they're supported by support staff. And what was reported by one of the larger organisations is they're not having any issue recruiting to staff. So there could be opportunities within that space for us to kind of offset some of the challenges that are being faced in the social work service by closer and more investment in third sector organisations where they're not having an issue around recruitment. So that's just an example, I suppose, of depending on the role that they are recruiting to, they're managing, they're reporting managing fairly well. Then you've got what Cathy was talking about just in terms of what can they afford to recruit to. So to be able to kind of manage within the funding envelope, they're probably all having to reduce slightly their headcount, their establishments, to be able to operate within that kind of funding space. So they are experiencing challenges, but the challenges relate to what they are funded to do. Their challenges are slightly different from ours in terms of they can attract staff. So it's about, I suppose, maximising and mitigating the risks of this recruitment and retention challenge by working even more closely with our third sector organisations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any final questions?
So I think convener will just take that to the recommendation. There's no more questions, and the committee, like I said at the start, has been asked to note the report. There's no other no requests for external additional information or reports. So it's just a case of the committee agreeing to note the report.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Moving on to point 6, following the public pound poverty and equalities report. If Sarah would like to take us through that.
Sally, I think.
Sally, sorry.
Delighted to hand over to Sarah if she wishes to, but
Sarah.
No problem at all. Okay, good morning everyone, and I think actually, to be fair, Sarah has done already half the job for me in presenting this report, because it is a standard report in terms of bringing to you external organisations that are funded under our following the public pound recommendations. So you will see some similarities between the two reports, the one you've just considered and today's. This report covers the organisations that we fund that relate to our poverty and inequality duties and commitments. So they are around our priority to make sure that everybody has an equal chance to be healthier, happier, safer, and to build sustainable communities. The recommendations are similar to the ones you had for the last report. And again, the background information there is around how we monitor them under the following the public pound guidelines and criteria. So the organisations that fall under this report, we have 4 of them. We've got LGBT Youth, Citizens Advice, of which there's 3 operate across the area. We've got Macmillan Money Matters and the Armed Services Project that is run by Denny Citizens Advice. And section 3.5 of the report shows you the amount of funding against each of these organisations. We then go on to just note that the first of those falls into our equalities duty around making sure that we are tackling discrimination, advancing opportunity for people with protected characteristics, and fostering good relationships. So very much LGBT Youth Scotland is funded to support our equalities objectives. The other 3 organisations all fall into our poverty commitments, which are specified out in Towards a Fairer Falkirk and our Child Poverty Action Plan, as well as in the Falkirk Plan, the Community Planning Partnerships Plan. So these organisations all really help us to achieve our outcomes around access to services, income maximisation, and making sure that people have access to appropriate financial products and services, things that are all the more important as we look at increasing costs of living. That brings me on just to section 4 of the report, where I kind of felt we really needed to acknowledge as part of this report the situation that we find ourselves in. I think last year we were talking about the impact that COVID had on people experiencing or at risk of poverty. Now we are looking at very severe increasing costs of living, and some stats and information are set out in section 4 on this report. Just to acknowledge section 4.2 and the tax cuts, this is a bit of a moving feast, and indeed those tax cuts have changed again since this report was first written. So the analysis of the tax cuts, which shows the difference between female workers and male workers, is no longer accurate because of changes again to the tax cuts. But the point still stands that I guess poverty is very gendered and has a bigger impact on females than on males. The report has appendices for each of the organisations in the same way as the one that Sarah just presented to you, and I'm pleased to say that I'm joined by the monitoring officers for the organisations today to take any questions that you may have. So happy to look at the individual reports or any questions from me on the cover report.
Do we have any questions on the cover report for Sally? Yeah. And we can move to the appendices, Sally.
Yep, so Michelle Brown is here to talk about LGBT Youth, which is the first one, and then I think it's myself for the Citizens Advice Bureau. We've then got Macmillan Money Matters, where we're joined by George Paul, and we've got Ewan McWilliams for the Armed Services Project.
Right, thank you. Questions on the Appendix 1?
Sorry, Sally, we weren't sure just whether you wanted each of your officers to say a small piece on each one, because we didn't do that the previous report, so just for consistency, but we do have time obviously as well, given the way the morning's going, so if you felt it beneficial.
We weren't intending to, unless you particularly want us to. That's not what we've done previously. We've just taken any questions. However, I'm sure the officers would be willing to if indeed that's what committee wish.
Well, I think no, it was just the flow of the conversation was maybe taking the wrong way. No, I think the committee are happy just to go through each one and get on questions, just as we did with Sarah's reports.
Perfect, thank you.
Do members have any questions for Appendix 1, LGBT Youth Scotland? Councillor Balfour?
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, just the statement that says there's reduced stigma related to substance abuse. I just wondered how that was quantified.
Thank you, Councillor Balfour. The conversations with the organisation haven't highlighted that in the actual reports, but I'd be certainly happy to take that forward at our meeting next week and then bring that back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Forrest?
Yeah, thanks. I think this one will be yours, Michelle. LGBT Youth Scotland delivers I work within the Falkirk secondary schools. Can you be a wee bit more specific? Tell us a wee bit more about that.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Forrest. So the workbook at the secondary schools operates on a couple of levels, if you like. So you'll see I've noted in the report that some of the schools have been supported to achieve their charter status. So the charter status goes beyond legislative requirements and looks at inclusion, reviews policies, practices and procedures within schools to make that more an inclusive and safe space for young people. Beyond the schools that are moving through charter status, LGBT Youth Scotland also provide support and advice. Predominantly, that has been for non-binary young people within schools. Quite specific advice they've been providing, but it's also to think about the practices that are within there and the pathways that can be facilitated between activities within school and how they can support that and meeting young people across Falkirk and not just within their school community.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Moving on to Appendix 2. The project income maximisation funding for dairy and dinner pays, Falkirk and Grangemouth and Bowness Citizens Advice Bureaus. Do we have any questions? Councillor Binney?
Yes, thank you, convener. It's regarding the Citizens Advice Bureau and things like that. How many Citizens Advice Bureaus do where are they, and what hours are they opening? And regarding advertising the citizens advice to our communities and that, so they can take up actually on income maximisation, how is that done? What is the marketing for the citizens advice? I mean, I do remember at one point everybody knew a bit of citizen advice, so knew exactly where they were in the town centre. But since the start of the pandemic, there's been a change there, significant change. I think people, I feel in my community don't know where they are and how they can contact them the same way. So I think there has been a change there. So can you tell me these things, where they are and how they're operating, what hours they're operating, and how is the public made aware that they're there so they can take up this service? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Binney. In terms of where they are, that's reasonably easy. The addresses are included in section 6 of the report, but it's notable that the Grangemouth Citizens Advice Bureau has moved since the pandemic. That is the up-to-date address that is there. It is actually now more in the town centre of Grangemouth than it was previously. So it was previously kind of out the back of the car park in a building there. It's now part of the town centre arcade, and I think that's really helped Grangemouth because a lot of people have seen it and come in because it is on that kind of as part of the shopping centre. Within Falkirk, the cab is in Vicar Street, so just up and across the road from the retail centre. And in Denny, it's in an old Victorian building off the back of the car park at the other side of the library, so just a little bit off the town centre. I don't know off the top of my head their opening hours. I have to say I couldn't say that. I know that they have been gradually opening back up again following the pandemic along the lines of council services as well. So they do have drop-in clinics. They have where it's available by appointment, but I'd need to check for the exact opening hours. What I will say is that in line with many of our services, following the pandemic resulted in a change on how they handled clients, how clients got in touch and how they provided their services. And some of that has maintained. So they are doing a lot more now by telephone, by email, and they offer video conferencing, although that doesn't always suit everybody, particularly those if you're on a data contract on your phone, it hoovers your data if you try and do video conferencing. So given a lot of their clients are on a low income, that isn't always ideal. But yes, they have maintained that flexibility of service where pre-pandemic it was very much face-to-face. They are actually available in many different ways now, which I think actually increases availability. In terms of promotion of the services, the 3 Citizens Advice Bureaus will do their own promotions. They will, attend local events, do leaflets, that kind of thing. They've been involved in some of the library events recently. There has also been national campaigns, and the Scottish Government have done a fair bit around that uptake of money advice and directing people to Citizens Advice Bureaus. We also work very closely with them to include them in any promotions that we are doing, because I think that shows that offer of choice to individuals. So if we are trying to encourage people to talk to someone about their financial issues. We always say there's council services, there's also the 3 area citizens advice bureaus, and we will provide links and information to where they are. I suppose, like all these things, there's probably more we could do to promote them, but then they have a lot of demand anyway as well, so we don't want to swamp them. But I think you're right, we need to make sure that those who need those services are aware of them, and that's absolutely part of what we try and do around the whole host of services that help people with their finances.
And it's good to highlight that, because I feel that, since the pandemic, it has changed, the community's thinking, where is all these organisations now, and trying to find them. So highlighting them is a very good thing, I would say, for our communities. But thank you, Sally. Thank you.
Councillor Balfour?
Thanks, convener. Yeah, it's not really a question, it's just a quick statement. I occasionally get constituents contacting me to say that they've been dealing with the citizens advice, and they've had a good service and positive outcome. So just to mention that.
Thank you, that's good to hear.
Councillor Aitchison?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, you touched on it a wee bit in your answer to Councillor Binney, Sally. Just saying that there was a lot of face-to-face meetings, and the service delivery is now different, and it's offering a lot of different aspects that people can contact citizens advice. If people wished to go back to face-to-face, would there be enough capacity to support that?
I think there's almost never enough capacity for money advice, particularly in the growing climate that we face, and the fact that these organisations have cut over the a few years ago, services have been cut. But they are accommodating face-to-face, they are accommodating the demand that is there, and they are adjusting opening hours to match that demand. I know that, whenever we come together as a joint working group, that's one of the things that they are discussing and comparing, and, yes, they've increased this bit, they've increased that bit. So I don't think, I'd need to double check, I'm not sure they are open quite as long as they were previously, but what they are open accommodates the demand that is currently there, and then allows them to do that telephone and online engagement as well for people who choose those methods, because at the end of the day that can reduce travel costs, and it can actually bring people who wouldn't walk into a cab, perhaps worried about stigma or work, fitting it around work, for example, but actually can access services in different ways. So I'm comfortable the organisations are meeting that demand that is there.
I mean, it is good, but it's also a more personal service if you're sitting across the table speaking one-to-one to somebody rather than on your phone. Yeah.
Absolutely. And often it will evolve. So they might start with a phone call with somebody, but if that isn't working for that individual, or things are getting particularly complex, right, okay, can you come in? Can we meet to discuss that? So it's very much tailored towards who they're dealing with, how that person wants to engage, and what the level of need is for that individual or household.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thanks. Moving on to Appendix 4, Forth Valley Macmillan Money Matters Project. Do we have any questions?
I think we're good for that.
For that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the last one, sorry, we lost our place here, is just the Armed Forces project. Is there any questions? The final appendix. Councillor Balfour.
Councillor Balfour?
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just wondered with the cost of living crisis, how that's affecting the service. Are they getting more people contacting them, or any other issues that have arisen because of this?
Thanks for your question, Councillor Balfour. The cost of living crisis is changed, so that's come through this year. This is looking at the previous year, so we should know more within what monitoring reports that are coming in. The previous ones, the previous couple of years have been adjusted based on the COVID scenario and the impact that that's had on service, so it reduced the numbers of clients that the service seen, and that's predominantly because most of their clients deal with face-to-face because they're digitally excluded. So this should hopefully, we'll be hopefully to see when the latest figures come in from the new monitoring reports for 2022 and beyond, if they're having more people come in. But I would fully anticipate that a lot of the kind of themes of the kind of support that's needed will be financial. They always are. It's a predominant thing, looking for kind of enhanced maximisation, income maximisation for the individuals, the particular support channels that are available to veterans. But hopefully next year's report will be able to answer more of that question.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Balfour?
None further.
Like I say,
Any final questions? Looking at all the projects, what would the impact of service provision be if the council was not able to fund at the same level? Sally?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. Thank you, convener. I think for all the projects, any further cuts would result in a cut directly to the service that is provided to the people who receive those services. I think all the projects here have been cut over a number of years, and then whilst funding has perhaps remained static over the last couple of years, static funding in itself, given inflation costs, is actually not really static. I'm not explaining that properly, but like we all are, these organisations are facing increased costs, they're facing increased staff costs, increasing utility bills, for example. So even static funding is actually a cut on what they have year on year on. Any further cut in funding would result in a decrease in service and probably a loss of staff to these organisations. We could go into detail for each of them because it is slightly different. I know, for example, Macmillan, when we last looked at it, and I don't mean to speak over the monitoring officer, George, who is with us, but we get a kind of a share of that project as part of a wider project. Any cut to that amount will actually reduce that project to nothing. You know, it almost blows out the deal that we have, and that project we would get, probably would not continue if that funding was cut anymore. Certainly I can speak for the Citizens Advice Bureaus because I work very closely with them. Any further cuts, they would need to look at reducing their staff and reducing that provision. You know, it's a challenge enough for them just now, but any further funding cuts would ultimately reduce the benefit to the people in Falkirk and reduce that added value that all these organisations bring around money advice. So, you know, I think money advice across Falkirk returned a kind of 13 times return on investment last year. For every pound that the council put into money advice, you know, you're getting a £13 money back to the Falkirk area through increased benefits and income coming into the area. So we would decrease that, we would impact on that.
Thanks, Sally.
So, yeah. I think just of that, I think that is the final question, so I can interrupt. So just that being the case, we got the recommendations, and I don't think there's any follow-up. Reports requested. I think there was an action to come back from Appendix 1, but otherwise the report's just being noted by the committee. Thank you.
That's us. So that was a very quick meeting this morning. Thank you to all the presenters of the reports and all the questions from the committee. It was a really informative session. This will be the last one for this year. So we'll have the new dates coming out for next year as well. But no, thank you to everyone today for attending. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.